This is Fortress on a Hill with Henry, Danny, Kagan, and Giovanni.
Welcome to Fortress on a Hill, a podcast about U.S. foreign policy, anti-imperialism, skepticism, and the American way of war. I'm Henry. Thank you for joining us today. With me is Kagan and Giovanni. Fellas, how are you doing?
Hey.
Excellent.
Right here.
And we are joined by Camilo. Sorry, I'm having word trouble today. Camilo Mejia. My wife's from Mexico. This shouldn't be this hard for me. He was born in Nicaragua, but moved to the U.S. as an adolescent. Shortly after graduating high school, he joined the U.S. military and eventually deployed to Iraq in 2003. After 5 months in active combat, including posts in Baghdad, I'm assuming this is Haditha, but they didn't spell it right, Assad and Ramadi, he was sent home on leave, where he recognized and publicly condemned the Iraq War as criminal and immoral. He was subsequently court-martialed and charged with desertion and sent to serve 9 months of incarceration at Fort Sill in Oklahoma. Mejia lives in Miami, and he continues to speak out against U.S. imperialism. Camilo, welcome to Fortress on a Hill.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
So I'm gonna let Giovanni take over here, and let's talk about Nicaragua.
Awesome. Yeah. So before we started the recording, we're having like a side conversation. And I thought it would be interesting if we get the conversation we're having on recording, so public so everybody can hear. So Mejia and I, we go way back. We've done a couple of trainings together, mostly about hybrid warfare. We have done workshops, and we have been invited by different organizations to do these workshops on hybrid warfare. But I've never met Mejia in person, right? I've almost met him in person about 2 years ago, but it didn't kind of work out. The schedule didn't kind of work out. I was in his neighborhood. I was like probably about you said about 10 minutes away from you. I was. So when I called him, I didn't know where he lived, so I just decided to call him. And he said, "Well, you're about 10 minutes away from my home, but how are you gonna be in the area?" He said, "Well, I'm gonna try, just here for a day trip here in Miami, and maybe after work we can get together. But I think you had a meeting afterwards, and then we'll call me again, saying the meeting's going to run a little bit late, but I couldn't stay in Miami, so I had to leave. So we weren't able to meet. But we've had several conversations. We have, we dived into different type of, studies, particularly hybrid warfare, which is the new way, just like Henry mentioned earlier, which is the way that the United States makes war nowadays. Multifaceted, but different means and different ways, to inflict pain on other nations. So we've done work on that. But I've known about Camilo since about 2004, I believe, 2003 or 2004, when the Iraq invasion, because Camilo was a dissenter early. It's one of the earliest dissenters of the Iraq War, coming back from Iraq. And in this part, I'm gonna let him talk a little bit more about that. But I heard about him through a piece that was done by NPR, talking about the process and what was going on with Camilo Mejia. You want to share a little bit on that?
Yeah, definitely. So with the Iraq War, that was really towards the end of my 8-year military contract. I'd been in the military in active duty first since 1997, 1998, I want to say. Well, 2003 was 8 years for me. So 1990, I want to say 1995. Yeah, 1995, I joined active duty. And then, I got out of active duty, and to finish my 8 years, I joined the Florida National Guard, because that gave me the opportunity to continue to serve as an infantryman. And I didn't want to have to go to, to any other school. I wanted to remain an infantryman and just finish my time and at home and go to college. And by that time, I already had matured a lot. I was about to graduate from college. I was already reading and questioning a lot, getting into geopolitics. I knew that we didn't really have a solid case to go after Iraq. But at the same time, I was about one semester away from graduating at the University of Miami, and I had already started to get ready for grad school. And part of me didn't think that the war was actually going to happen. At our level back then, there was so much opposition, international opposition. Even NATO was not for it, at least not in the beginning. Major allies like France and Germany, even Mexico, which basically always did what the U.S. said. The Dixie Chicks were against it. Like there was so much opposition, millions of people marching against the war, against the war all over the world. So I guess, I was somewhat naive, when I believed that, it's just going to be a huge show of force. We'll be there a few months, and then, we'll come home heroes and continue on with our lives. That unfortunately didn't play out as I thought. The first mission that we had in Iraq was this place called Al-Assad, which was a bombed out Iraqi Air Force base. And we basically, to be blunt about it, we tortured people there. We tortured prisoners who were, had been Bedouins, basically, wrong time, wrong place. And that was the beginning of the war experience for me. Prior to that, we had been in Jordan, where we had been protecting some Patriot sites, where the U.S. had made a deal with the Jordanian king that we would intercept any Scud missiles that Saddam Hussein might send to Israel, which is something that happened in the first during the Gulf War. That to get Israel to retaliate and that way encourage other Arab nations to join the fight. So this time around, the U.S. said to the Jordanian king, let me use your desert as a staging ground, and I'll set up some Patriot missile sites on your territory and intercept any Scud missiles that Saddam Hussein might want to launch that might fall in your territory. So we had this secret deal with the Jordanians, and our first mission was to basically protect these missile sites. But then after that, very soon after the war started, we went to Iraq. I want to say April. Yeah, April, May. We arrived in Iraq. We spent some time at Baghdad International, and then from there we went to Al-Assad. And then at Al-Assad, that was the first mission. So from that point on, obviously my opposition to the war is not only political, only ideological, only based on what I had read, but now we're in it, right? And we're torturing people. It's not something we're reading about. This is not some news analysis. This is not something we're reading on a magazine. We're actually there, and we're doing that stuff. And from there, it just got worse. We went to Haditha, where we learned of some pretty nasty things that happened. Atrocities that were committed there. And then from there, we went to Ramadi, where I spend most of my time, and that's where a lot of the bulk of the war crimes took place. But in an environment, obviously an environment where you're struggling to stay alive. Basically, you're a moving target every day of your life. Anything that you do could result in you being blown to pieces. Even going to take a shit at the latrine, or taking a shower, which you couldn't do in the daytime because it's too hot. 104, 110 degree temperatures in this metal water tanks, would give you blisters if you took a shower at that time. So we had to go at night, which is when we had indirect fire attacks. And so in an environment like that, you don't really think morally that much. I did to some degree, but you're trying to foresee, where the next attack might come from, and you're trying to keep your men alive. And in my particular case, and this is something that got me into hot water with my chain of command, I always I'm proud to say that I led my men away from fire rather than into battle, away from battle, because the things that we were doing were so arbitrary. And it was so clear also that we had people in our chain of command who were so bent on getting, the coveted awards, like the combat infantry badge or, any other medals, like officers oftentimes, they view war and combat as, career opportunities. And in our particular case, we had captains and majors, and we had lieutenant colonels and colonels who had spent a lifetime in the military and had no combat experience. And so for them, it was really key to take advantage of the possibility. And we did a lot of things that were in violation of our training, in violation of, the rules of engagement, pretty much everything that we were told, which wasn't much to begin with, we violated in order to instigate the resistance into battle. And the bulk of the casualties were suffered by the civilian population. And so, long story short, my initial opposition to the war, which had been very political, very ideological, became something very personal and became something very spiritual. And that's one of the things that I think that's tearing us apart, once we get home, is the moral injury, the things that we do that violate our moral code, which is, this written law that we have that guides, our behavior, our conscience, and violating that moral contract that we have with ourselves is what I think that's what getting a lot of people more than post-traumatic stress disorder, because I think post-traumatic stress disorder at the end of the day is a fear response, to a very traumatizing event. But moral injury is more about the things that we have a hard time forgiving ourselves for, because we didn't do what we were supposed to do, or we did nothing when we should have done something. So coming home for me just gave me the safety and the peace of mind to be able to go back to those moral questions, no longer on survival mode, thinking that, anything that I do would be my last action. And that's when you face your demons, when you're home and, nobody's shooting at you, and, you don't have to deal with improvised explosive devices or indirect fire or anything like that. And then you have to come to terms with what you did. And for me, that was a really difficult thing. I had a small child. She's 22 now. She was 3 at the time, 4. And I didn't know if I could be a dad to her because of all the things that I had done. How do you teach a kid right from wrong when you have done so much wrong yourself? And just like all these questionings, that began to torment me. And eventually, I realized that I was a conscientious objector. It was something that I fought mentally, because I said, I've already been there. We were in combat, we torture people, we kill people. It's too late for me to be a conscientious objector. Not knowing that it's really the very experience of war what really makes you be anti-war. I don't think there's anyone who can be more anti-war than a combat veteran, who has actually experienced the horror of war. But I didn't see it that way at the time. I thought that it was too late for me. I was tainted, I was already a bad person. But I got some counseling and I started writing a conscientious objector application. And that was a journey for me, a spiritual journey to come to terms with all the bad shit that we had done. And, I was able to get over my fear also of what the military would do to me if I spoke out against the war, because I began to think about really what humanity had sacrificed and what people were still sacrificing, to oppose war. I came across people like Brian Wilson, who lost his legs trying to stop weapons shipments to Central America back in the days. And, people who had lost everything to war, victims of war, victims of landmines that were left behind. And that gave me perspective, that whatever happened to me could not be as horrible as what so many people had lost or had gone through. And, I felt empowered to speak out and say, you know what, I'm not going to fight this war. I'm not going to be a party to this supreme war crime against humanity. And, I'm not going to fight your war anymore. And of course, I was the first combat veteran to do that at the time. There were other objectors. You talked about NPR, and we have a couple of early members of, back then it was called the Iraq Veterans Against the War, but Stephen Funk was one of them, a Marine who came out of the closet and out against the wars, which took a lot of friggin' courage, for a Marine to come out as gay and anti-war. He was actually just getting out of jail as I was going through my journey. And then we also had an Air Force captain, Stephen Potts, and he came out on NPR as well before getting deployed. He never got deployed. But I was the first one to speak from personal experience and talk about what was going on in Iraq, on the ground in Iraq. And so it was a pretty big deal, I guess, for the media. The media was not what it is today. There was still a little bit of objectivity, like the media was not so co-opted as it is now. And, the story got a lot of traction, both in the US and internationally. And I think that ended up, working to my advantage to have that, that many eyes on my case. And that included Amnesty International, which I'm not a fan of anymore. But back then, they adopted me as a prisoner of conscience, and they issued a warning that if I was incarcerated, that they would launch a campaign to secure my safety and my release. And, I had a sham of a court-martial that lasted 3 days. You would thought Osama bin Laden was being tried because of the amount of security around the courthouse. That was in Fort Benning, Georgia. No, I'm sorry, Fort Stewart. That was Fort Stewart. And yeah, I was found guilty of desertion. They put me away on a 12-month sentence. I did 9 in Fort Sill. And then I got out 9 months later and, wrote the book, Road from Ramadi, which I think you guys have a copy of, and began doing counter-recruiting work, joined Iraq Veterans Against the War, Veterans for Peace. And I've been doing anti-war organizing and activism ever since.
We get asked often what people can do to help support the podcast. One really powerful way to help us grow and reach more people is to leave us a review. You can do that on iTunes, which is the best place to leave a review. iTunes does reach the most people these days. The next best place is Facebook. Go to our Fortress on a Hill Facebook page and look for the Reviews tab. Money is tight these days for everyone, especially in the lingering shadow of COVID. Penny pinching to make it through the month often doesn't give people the funds to contribute to a creator they support. So we consider it the highest honor that folks help us fund the podcast in any dollar amount they're able. Patreons is the main place to do that, and for supporters who can donate $10 a month or more, they will be listed right here as an honorary producer, like these fine folks: Fahim Shirazi, James O'Barr, James Higgins, Eric Phillips, Paul Appel, Julie Dupree, Thomas Benson, Janet Hansen, Tristan Oliver, Daniel Fleming, Michael Karen, Zach H., Ren Jacob, Howard Reynolds, Rick Coffey, and the Status Quo podcast. Your contributions are wonderfully helpful to us. Thank you so very much. However, if Patreon isn't your style, you can contribute directly to us through PayPal at paypal.me/Fortress on a Hill. Or please check out our store on Spreadshirt for some great Fortress merch. And now, let's get back to the podcast.
Thank you for sharing that. I was also in that. I was active duty back then as well, and I was actually in Fort Benning. I was in instructor status. I was at the what formerly called School of the Americas, which is they got renamed to Western Institute for Security and Cooperation. I remember reading about your story, hearing about your story through NPR, because I was going through the same thing what you just described, right? I was going through the same thing at the time. I already hit 10 years in the military at the time, and right there and then, at the beginning, I didn't think the war was going to happen because I was a military dependent when the first Gulf War happened. And I was inside of a military base and I saw the deployments. That's how everything ended. And it was about 100 days, et cetera, right? So I figured it was going to be something similar. But you said mentioning seeing all the resistance, seeing all the protests and everything like that, I didn't think it was going to happen. But when it happened, I was actually when the shock and awe started, I was actually teaching. And my supervisor interrupted my class and to show the students what was happening. And I had a big TV in the classroom and turn on the TV and watch. So the way we would watch all the bombing and everything, right? It was daytime on our side, it was nighttime on their side. And it was like he was so excited and ecstatic about it, like as if we won the Super Bowl, and I recall thinking as he was being so emotional, so excited about it, so happy about it that was happening. I recall thinking about, am I surrounded by psychopaths? That's psychotic, And right then, that's when I decided that I couldn't continue in the military. At the time, I was 10 years in the military already, so I was like right at the hump. 10 more years I would have been retired. But at that time, I decided that that would be my last investment, and that was it. Yes. Yeah. Anybody else want to share before we continue? Want to add anything?
I wonder about the experience of the soldiers that were under you when you came out, when what our leaders do really matters. Even it affects us deeply. And I would ask, is are you still in touch with any of those guys? Did they what did they say about that period of their lives, in terms of you as a leader, and what your choice to dissent did? I mean, was, how did they view it?
Yeah, definitely. I actually had a very interesting experience with two of them about a month ago. No, actually 2 months ago. We went to a firing range. I hadn't seen this guy since 2003, 2004, around that time, and we reconnected. And I said, yeah, let's get together, let's do something. And they said, let's go to a firing range. So I wasn't really sure if, how mad they were at me, if they were going to try to shoot me or something. But no, we had fun. We had a really great time. Mixed feelings, to be honest with you, because obviously we were very, very close in Iraq. We went through a lot of shit together, combat, we survived a lot. We did a lot of bad shit together. But there was also a sense of betrayal from the chain of command and from the entire war experience as well. So one of them did not, it was two of them. We were in touch on the phone with a third. Two of them were okay with the whole thing. One of them was still somewhat angry, because to him, once you're wearing the uniform, that's it. If you're wearing the uniform, you do what you're told, whether you like it or not, and that's the end of it. And he holds a lot of resentment towards me, but he also holds a lot of resentment towards the military, because he does not. He's messed up, I think he's on 100% disability, and he has severe post-traumatic stress and other issues as well, from our service in Iraq. Prior to that, my contact with people in my unit was in the context of the court-martial, where people from my squad came and testified. And again, mixed feelings. because we had been very close to each other, and survived a lot of shit, gone through a lot of shit together. I think that there's a sense that I did what I did because I felt that I had to, that I was always a person who was questioning everything. You know, if we were given an order, for instance, to engage a civilian vehicle for crossing a line, you know, en route to a hospital, I would say we're not doing that. If you want to open fire, that's the order. You won't get in trouble. If you disobey that order, you could get in trouble, but I'm not going to open fire because I have to live with this shit. You know, we're the ones pulling the trigger, and this is a hospital route. And lo and behold, we have families go through that route. And I would always question things, you know, and if we had to set up a traffic control point, you know, I would make sure that we had chem lights, that we had barricades, that we had concertina wire, that, you know, we fired warning shots. You know, I would do absolutely everything in my power to ensure that there was no contact with anyone, enemy, civilians, whatever the case may be. I would question the soundness of missions when we'd go out there blind, basically with no OPs, with no, you know, presence patrols, in some cases, you know, without evac routes or anything like that. It was like we were basically going out of our way to get killed, to then unleash the power of the US military and, you know, instigate more firefights and things like that. So I would always question things like that. So it wasn't a complete shock to them that I decided not to go back, because I was questioning a lot of the things. And also because I was protecting them, not only their safety by trying as much as I could to evade having contact, but also because I was thinking about the moral part, and I was thinking about who is going to have to live with this crap. You know, it's us. This is our choice. So I think that there was a recognition of that, you know, that I did what I did because I felt morally compelled to do what I had to do. And so in that sense, I do think that there's a lot of understanding, but there's also a lot of resentment in the sense that, you know, we were like a family, and I was a father figure for many of them that were younger. They hadn't been in the military that long. Some of them were only National Guard, you know, so their training was not on par with active duty training. So there was a sense of abandonment, you know, from some of them, and there was some resentment. But I think in the end, we're still very close to one another. It's not the same with chain of command. I think my captain, who's now a lieutenant colonel, really hates my guts. My first sergeant hates my guts. I think my LT hates me as well. But the men, you know, the men who were in my squad, I was a squad leader. The men who were in my squad, I was fired from my first position as a squad leader. I was fired from my whole platoon because I was questioning a lot of what they were doing. You know, they were going after this guy. Coincidentally, is one of the ones that I went out with about 2 months ago. And I began to question, you know, I began to say, you know, look, like, we're going to combat with these kids, you know, like, the last thing we want is for them to hate us. And, you know, we're like a family out here, and we need to correct whatever we need to correct like a family, you know, not with punishment and shit like that. And they felt like I had not injected enough testosterone in my leadership style. And so they got rid of me. And so I, you know, on my, when we end up in Iraq, I'm already on my second squad leader position. And, you know, that both of them, I think that for both squads, you know, we got to get really close, you know, because I never felt like I had to be punitive. I never felt like I had to put my boot on people's faces, you know, to make them fear me in order to follow me. I felt like, you know, they had to know that I was there for them and that I respected them, and that, you know, their lives were in my hands and my life was in their hands. And so we established that type of relationship in Iraq, you know, with both squads. So of course there was going to be some resentment, and there was going to be a sense of abandonment. And that was one of the hardest things for me also to do. But it's also one of the things that works against you, you know, that they use this whole sense of family against you and say, hey, you have to go back out there and you have to do it. And like, once you get into the media circuits, you know, that's one of the things that they throw at you, you know, they tell you all the men in your squad and like all the fallen and whatnot. And I'm like, well, why don't you go ask Cheney that question? Ask Bush. that question, ask Rumfeld, I didn't put them in that situation, but at the end of the day, we have to live with our choices. We have to live with the things that we did or that we failed to do. And that's a personal choice. I feel like we committed a lot of war crimes. We did a lot of harm to the Iraqi people. But I would never judge any of the men that I served with, because the choice that I made was a very personal choice. And I respect that they stayed. I respect that, many of them felt the same way that I felt. But, they had this sense of duty that said, while you're wearing a uniform, you have to do what you're told and you have to stay. And I respect that. I disagree with it personally. I think that, you could bring this into any war where there have been war crimes. You could bring this to Nazi Germany. You could bring this into, Mussolini's military. You could bring this into, any situation where there have been horrible atrocities. And, what soldiers will say is, we're following orders. That's not good enough for me. And that wasn't good enough for me back then. It's not good enough for me now. But I think I've made my peace with it. And I think the men in my squad have made their peace with it. And I think we're okay now.
I think the choice of the all-volunteer force after Vietnam to move from where guys would go on deployments without connection to the home unit in any way. You went home. I mean, you literally went home, versus Iraq and Afghanistan, where exactly what you're describing is that, you go with this group of guys, you train up with them, you go there with them, you come home with them. And it creates this family mentality, however positive or toxic anybody wants to see it, but it makes you hold on in a different way. It makes you express yourself in a different way. And I think that was a very deliberate choice, whether anybody wants to say it or not, to try to make sure that those ties, those uniform ties, are that much stronger and that much harder to break off of. But I must say, dude, I think you gave a fucking fantastic example to your men, and especially that made it clear that it was your choice. Is that it was and a hard one, a very hard one. I mean, you were in at fucking Sill for 9 months. I mean, but powerful stuff, man.
Yeah, I think one of the reasons I think we ended up connecting, Camilo, is because we have a shared interest, and our shared interest, it has been, militarism, U.S. militarism and activity in Latin America, and particularly your country of origin, Nicaragua, and also one of my countries of origin, Dominican Republic, also has a shared history as well, which also, simultaneously was happening with, one thing, the invasion occupation of both of our countries, both the Dominican Republic and the and Nicaragua, and long occupations, and the aftermath of the occupations, which is after the U.S. troops withdrew from both the Dominican Republic and Nicaragua, right? They left behind strongmen. They left behind a dictatorship to suppress the population, but also to keep safeguard American interests in those particular two countries, right? And I'm talking about Nicaragua, for example, was invaded, and it was part of the what so-called banana wars. When banana wars is because Nicaragua was considered a banana country. It was same as the Dominican Republic and all the Central American countries, because the United Fruit Company had a lot of interest, a lot of influence in those countries, and they imported a lot of bananas out of those countries, right? So that's hence the term Banana Republic comes from, because it was ran by the United Fruit Company, which is an American company. But I'm talking about Nicaragua. The invasion, I believe, happened in 1910, all the way to the 1920s, and the occupation in the Republic was 1916. It ran all the way to the 1920s. In the case of Nicaragua, when they withdrew, left behind the Somoza family, which ruled for about another 30 years. And in the case of the Dominican Republic, they left behind the Trujillo family, which they ruled for another 30 years. And that pretty much sparked, because I know you said you did a lot of work. You've done a lot of work since your experience in Iraq. You did a lot of work in anti-war and anti-recruitment, etc. But you also done a lot of work in bringing education of hybrid warfare, U.S. activities in Latin America. What we're seeing today, violence and aggression against your country still, in 2022. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, definitely. The great Dave Klein, who was a longtime president of Veterans for Peace, and he was one of the original Vietnam Veterans Against the War activists. He at one point, I think he ran the Oleo Strut, which was a GI coffee shop. But I heard him talk once about the awakening of the anti-war soldier, right? When you go from being a gung-ho, young guy, out there in Nam or Ramadi or, whatever the case may be, and you realize that you start with this sense of betrayal, that's grounded in your own experience. And that's akin to getting punched in the face and, falling face down, in the mud. And you become an anti-war soldier as you get up and you wipe the mud off your eyes and you start seeing the larger picture.
That's part 1 of our discussion with Camilo. Join us for part 2, which will drop in about a week. We'll be discussing Nicaragua, hybrid warfare, and Camilo's advocacy for the Sandinista movement there. It's another amazing episode you don't want. We're on Twitter at Fortress on a Hill, and also at facebook.com at Fortress on a Hill. You can find our main blog page and our full collection of episodes at www.fortressonahill.com. iTunes, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, Patreon, Spotify. You name it, almost anywhere you listen, we're already waiting for you. And hey, we're always in the market for more Patreon supporters. Please consider becoming a patron at patreon.com. And if you're not into giving us a monthly payment, think about giving us a couple bucks on PayPal. The link is in the show notes. Skepticism is one's best armor. Never forget it. We'll see you next time.
Come on, you good people, and listen to my song.